Okay, ladies and gentlemen, do you have any questions about the first hour? About the discussions of the first hour? No questions. Everything perfectly crystal clear. Great. Please. World of?
World of goods, you said, where the soul enjoys its existence before coming to birth.
Okay, forms. World of forms. And world of these ephemeral transitory things like we are, the things we are having in this world with us, okay? These are transitory, okay? So they cannot constitute a legitimate object of knowledge. They cannot be an legitimate object of knowledge. In other words, Plato openly says this. They are not worth to know. Then what's worth to know is the original forms, pure and simple forms. Okay, so he asks always the question, what is justice? What is good? What is beauty? What is this or what is that? Okay, what is, for instance, not the constitutions of the existing societies, but what is the best society, okay? The form of society or political regime as we understand the term today, for instance. Take a look at his republic, for instance, okay? There he wouldn't discuss the actually existing republics or states of the ancient Greece, okay? He would discuss a concept of the best society, okay? Best political organization. So our task, with one foot partaking in the world of forms with our soul, and with the other foot being of the matter, and therefore condemned to live in this world, so to speak, okay? Have to ask ourselves how we can implement that best society found out by intellectual effort, okay, into this world. Okay. So Plato's and all the Platonics' effort to erect the best society in their actual political engagements refers to this and make them supporters of tyranny in ancient Greek world, okay? Rather than democracy, okay? They were trying to fight against the so-called famous Athenian democracy, okay? And trying to establish a kind of tyranny under the power of a, what? Philosopher king. A politically powerful and knowledgeable person, knowing what the forms are, okay? Engaging in the task of forming or molding this world in the shape of the forms, original forms, okay? Now, a student of Plato, however, okay, would diverge from this thinking, okay? He would not follow in the footsteps of Plato as he did his masters, Socrates, okay, but rather begin to criticize the Platonic theory of forms, so-called Platonic theory of forms, okay. His name was Aristotle, as you may guess, okay. And Aristotle's world, in one sense, much more simple, in another sense, was much more complex, okay. He starts his investigation, so to speak, okay, with the actual experience. But this, don't forget, don't fall into the pitfall trap, okay? When I say actual experience, you may simply understand that as an individual human being, I myself, you your own selves on your own part, okay? Pass through the things in the world, the society, poverty, social stratification, inequality, etc., gender roles, etc. You may think that that's that simple. An experience then, what a gender is, for instance, what femininity, what masculinity is, what is being a male or female in a given society, or what does it mean, or what is to be rich or poor, etc., etc. No, this is a very serious trap, actually, one should be quite careful about. But without delving into the details of this trap, okay, again, in a rough, sketchy manner, let me present you how Aristotle thought about these things. Okay? He starts with the senses. Again, you've got to be careful. You may tend to think that, as most did, okay? Yeah, come on, man, we are human beings. We do have 5 senses, okay? 5 definite, discernible, decisively different from each other senses, okay? The sight, okay? Hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, etc., etc., okay? Again, Aristotle does not enter into the discussion of this. He simply, as many others did, accepts the given character of the human 5 senses. Okay? Therefore, later on we are going to problematize this. Later on, as well, he accepts the unproblematic character of human experience. In short, he falls into the traps. Okay? And he can easily say that, okay, we human beings have 5 distinct senses, and through the channel of these senses, or our own structure of sensibility, we do have experience of the world. Okay, somehow naive, but we will see, capable of producing quite different results than the Platonic one. So what I do here is to draw a line right now, a straight line. Actually, the shape of the line is not important. It's not directional, sorry for this, okay? A line of human sensibility upon which it turns out to be possible to discern particular experiences from each other, okay? So experience of my smelling of that coffee, okay? Another experience of my seeing of that coffee pot. Another experience of my walking here. And experiences of all these countless number of experiences that I get at the moment from being in this class. Okay? All these experiences, or the possibility of experiences, having experiences, passes through the requirement of having a sensibility, a certain structure of sensibility. In other words, practically said, I should have this sense of sight, I should have the sense of this, and I should have the sense of that, etc. Okay, and it has been accepted as we all, being human beings, okay, share this almost the same or similar, so to speak, structure of sensibility. Yeah, your sight may be better than mine, but we do have both, okay, the sense of sight, etc. Okay, so these experiences which take place at the moment, okay, which take place at the moment. At the moment, for instance, of my smelling this coffee in that glass, okay, I have the experience of the smell of the coffee, okay? But now, I do not have that experience any longer, but I remember, I recall it, okay? And I recall it in my memory, okay, mneme. The term for, Greek term for experience in ancient Greek, and mneme for memory, okay? So, however, I do not recall, I do not bring that experience into my memory a couple of moments later as it was. No, the smell is no longer here, okay? But what is here, according to Aristotle, is the representation of the smell. And so, representation is a component of memory. Okay? So the actual original smell, when it has been put into the memory, assumes the form of the representation, in other words. Okay? So what do I have here, which I'll later point out as the inside? Not yet inside of what? I did not say this. Okay? So our representations. The outside is full of the objects, so to speak, okay? The objects enabling me to have those experiences, okay? But the world, now I am withdrawing into this world of representations or world of memory filled with representations. Aristotle will give us a simple principle here, okay? For the sake of easy recalling, memory classifies those representations according to the principle of their similarities and differences. Okay? So this means that, for instance, all the experiences of black that I had, okay, will come together and unite into a cluster, okay, that I would call black color. All the experiences of yellow will come together. Don't forget not to do something out of the requirement of easy remembering. Okay? So I am organizing my experiences, or my memory, better said, not I myself. My memory is organizing its own content. Okay? So to be able to easily pick up certain particular content out of the mass, okay, it brings together all those similar experiences, separating these similar experiences from the unsimilar ones. Okay? So constituting higher level clusters. This is called katalon in ancient Greek, translated into English as universals, or sometimes as universal principle. Here the term refers to the fact that that principle, or that universal, whatever it is, okay, is capable of functioning the determination of the lesser level experiences. So when I say here black, okay, black color, for instance, you can understand that all the other lesser level experiences falling into this category do somehow to do with blackness, okay, black color. So when I try to recall a past experiences related with blackness, okay, of course, what would I do is just to take a look at inside this category, under, okay, the contents of this category. Ah, yeah, I remember I saw once, okay, a couple of years ago in Italy, somewhere in Italy, I saw a black cave, for instance, okay. That experience was in the category of black. That's why, okay. So, of course, the same with the other colors, and say, for instance, all the experiences of different colors still constituting a higher level of generalization. Now, this time, I would term, say, experiences of color. Now, here the term color functions as the universal principle, okay, to determine all the lesser level, both abstractions and actual empirical experiences, saying that they all are somehow related with color. Okay? The same can be applied to hearing, the same can be applied to any other thing, etc., etc., okay? So according to Aristotle, finally culminating on a certain universal principle, okay, on a certain universal principle, so high in the level of its abstraction that it does no longer denote to a particular content, but the totality of all of the representations. Okay? In other words, all representations in the final analysis do arrange themselves into a single whole. Okay? Aristotle expresses this by the term unconditioned but conditioning principle. Okay. Itself is not conditioned by any higher principle, but conditioning all the lesser level principles, in other words. Okay. In other words, to put it in modern language, the highest level of generalization. Okay. Now the problem with it is that, okay, when I arrive at the highest level of generalization, this generalization turns out to be so general that it can no longer denote to a particular content. Okay. That highest level of generalization does not mean anything else than apart from the unity of all. Okay? Or simply put, if you like, the unity of existence. Okay? Everything, every representation in the memory, in other words. The unity of every representation in the memory, or if you like, the unity of the memory, or if you like, the unity of the mind. At that stage, Aristotle would not name it as the mind, but rather he would call it as logos. It is this same logos that we have as the prefix of in the name of our own discipline, sociology, you know. Logos on the social, it means. Okay? So this is the hierarchy of, so to speak, knowledge. And according to Aristotle, individuals achieve different levels of generalization in their thinking and in their practice. For instance, technicians, okay, technicians dealing with the experience at lesser level of generalizations, he would call them as tekton. Okay, the origin of our term technology, technician, etc. Okay, techne. Those engaged in the activity of techne, okay, doing things while knowing how to do things. Okay? He calls them as tekton, and he refers to those who achieve higher level of generalizations. Okay? For instance, those who are only capable of knowing how to melt down a mass of copper, okay? The copper worker or coppersmith, for instance, okay, but does not know whys of the actions or practice of copper, okay? He is going to put at the level of the tekton, the technician, the smith, okay? The blacksmith, the coppersmith. They do not know the chemical or physical structure of the materials they are dealing with. They do not the functioning of the atoms, protons, neutrons, etc., etc. So they do not know whys, okay? But they only know how to make a weapon, for instance, out of a bunch of iron or copper, okay? So these are the tekton technicians. Okay, there are others achieving higher level of generalizations, okay? So knowing, so to speak, how to work with the metals generally, not only copper, not only iron, etc. He would call them as architecton, okay? The chief tekton, chief technician. Now corresponding to our contemporary modern term, the architect, okay? Architecton. And at higher, still higher levels, okay, how the matter acts, for instance, those who are capable of knowing, making that generalization with regard to the generality of the matter, for instance, okay, In other words, actually, this level would correspond both in translations and later interpretations of Aristotelian texts to our contemporary understanding of, falsely of course, misleadingly, of the sciences, certain fields of disciplined thinking. Okay? There, those who are capable of doing this would be translated as the scientists working at the level of episteme. Okay? So physicians, physicists, etc. Okay? And finally, of course, as you can imagine, those who are capable of establishing the connections between all these different levels, as well as the higher level of generalizations and lesser level of generalizations, as well as between the higher or lesser level of generalizations and other higher or lesser level of generalizations. In other words, those who are capable of arriving at the ability of tracing all the possible connections from a single simple experience up to the universal principle, which itself is unconditioned but conditioning all the rest. Okay? These are called the philosophers. Okay? So they are capable of dealing with the primary causes. Okay? Actually, the arche here. Okay? Here I translate it as the chief technician. Now I'm referring to it as the chief or primary or original principle. Okay? Those who are capable of connecting a given experience with the original principle then are the philosophers. Okay? Therefore, they are the ones who are capable of establishing the totality of the field of knowing. Okay? This model might give you somehow an empirical impression, okay? Simply because we started with the actual empirical experiences, culminating in generalizations, just like in any empirical theory, you know. I'm gonna start to study the tree, each tree by its own self, and later on, out of these studies, when they are multiplied enough, I would start to develop certain principles capable of being generalizable for all the trees available to my experience. Okay? The difference is that in the first Platonic version, the determining principle was the idea. Okay? Or the form, eidos, okay? And I would judge the actual experience in accordance with actual experience's commitment to the requirements of the idea. So the idea functions here as the yardstick of the truth, the actuality and truth of knowledge. In Aristotelian model, it's somehow different, as you know, and the universalizing principle, or the principle, absolute principle itself, is always subject to modification. Okay? Actually, absolute principle can never be subject to modification simply because it is not conditioned. Okay? But as such, it's as well empty. It does not say anything. So what matters for us, that it turns out to be capable of establishing the unity of all experiences or representations of experiences, and no other task is expected from it. Okay? All the other tasks relating with the problem of explanation should be referred to lesser level generalizations, universalizations, which themselves are, of course, remain to be subjected to modification. Okay? In accord with the formation of the experiences, of course. For instance, my experiences of color blackness, okay? My experience of color blackness may not include pitch dark, but rather, say, rather darker shades of the gray. Okay? This means that I would not have no idea about the pitch dark. Okay? But someday I may get the experience of pitch darkness, okay? Real black, so to speak. Then this category needs to be modified. Okay? My interesting point is that while the Platonic model insists on the actual existence of the forms, when I apply this view to our contemporary sociological studies, it means insisting on the existence of a particular social. Okay? There is the social. But what you experience here as the social may differ from the original form. Okay? What they experience in France as social, okay, may differ from the original form, but these two different forms, okay, being imperfect replicas of the original form of the social. So then immediately I start to define to you what a social is, okay, what a poverty is, what a gender is, okay, without relating them or their content or their totality to the other existing experiences. As you can see, okay, I tend to think about the black, the social, the poverty, the income, as if they do have their own, so to speak, in itself existence. Okay? They do have their own in itself existence, but as an imperfect form of experience, my experience of poverty is this, goes in this way. Your experience of poverty goes in that way. But there is only one single poverty, and the differences between my and your experiences is the fault of our imperfect relations with the original in itself. Okay? In the Aristotelian path, however, you cannot imagine the given in itself existence of the things. Okay? There are no things, only principles. Okay? The table is principle. Okay? The table is a universalizing principle. Okay? Brought about by the thousands of experiences of table. Okay? If there may come new experiences of table, then, okay, what I was thinking as table would need to be changed. Okay? There is no table in itself. It is a simple generalization. Okay? A name. Out of this, it's only a name. Okay? Out of this, and the correspondence of the names and things, okay, later on this will evolve into this during the Middle Ages, would be called nominalism. Okay? So we have found ourselves, actually, I'm going to make a huge jump here to the modern thinking simply because medieval thinking, for the purposes of discourse, I'm not saying that unimportant in itself, okay? But for the purposes of discourse, we can jump over it, and we experience a new discovery of the ancient Greek thinking during this era of the beginning of the modern age, so to speak, which is usually referred as, it starts with Renaissance, of course, but I'm not going to deal with Renaissance period as well, as the Enlightenment, okay? The Enlightenment of the 17th century. Of course, we should be careful about such generalizations. When I say the Enlightenment, you may imagine that there was only one single and united current of thought to which we refer as the Enlightenment. No. Taking place at the same period of time? No, okay? There were different enlightenments, okay? Therefore, what we refer as the Enlightenment usually points to the specifically or primarily pointing to the differential enlightenment, okay? So starting with, of course, with the work of René Descartes, okay? Now, René Descartes, you know, was a man who first engaged in this withdrawal, you know, that dark room, sitting by the stove during the winter time, isolating himself from the external world, and then starting to negate all that he claimed up until that time he knew, okay? The famous method of doubt, okay, doubting. Fine. First he wrote in 1640, 44, I don't remember the exact date right now, okay, on the method of correct thinking, and later on, a couple of years after, that famous meditations. I'm going to concentrate on the second work and touch upon only some of the several meditations, not all of them, okay? The first meditation was about the question of existence. You know, he says that I am thinking, that the first part of that famous phrase, you know, I am thinking, I could be dreaming as well, etc. Okay, I am thinking. Now this proves itself to be very important in the history of the development of modern sciences, simply because apart from the section thinking, which I'm going to dwell on later, and apart from the I, or second aspect of the I, which I'm going to reserve for a later discussion again, okay? This simple I of the am thinking, okay, locates the thinking one at the center, okay? We don't know what this I yet. We are not asking further questions about it. But simply, it determines a central point. That's what I imply here, what I would like to say here, okay? Now, and thinking. Now, Descartes discovers that, actually, this activity of our own selves, so to speak, which we call thinking, is a very peculiar activity. Okay? Its peculiarity is this: even though it shows itself proceeding in a linear fashion, it actually is following a circle. Okay? Okay. In other words, apart from all the other objects which I have denied their existence by my method of doubting, okay, I no longer say that I know this, I know that, I know that, I know that, I know that, I know that the water boils at 100 centigrade degree, etc. I no longer say that. I no longer say that 2 plus 2 is equal 4 to 4, etc. Okay. I said that I'm going to start doubting about everything, validity of everything that I claimed up until now that I was knowing. Okay? No. So which means that I have emptied the content of my thinking. Okay? What has been left to my thinking as its object? Okay? thinking always requires an object to think about, so to speak, okay? And in this case of doubting, what has been left to think about for thinking is nothing other than its own self, okay? So in other words, thinking is thinking about itself. This points out to the circular character of thinking and starts the very possibility of thinking. Even though most of the time in our actual practical life, while we are thinking about things, about other human beings, about relations, about facts of the society, etc., okay, we may not be aware this requirement that thinking would necessarily starts by taking itself as it is object, okay? In other words, we may not be aware at that moment that we are thinking, okay? While we are thinking about things, okay? It sets the very, I would rather use a different strange term for Cartesian thinking, the condition of possibility of thinking itself, okay? Now, it started, and now I am thinking this, and I am thinking that. The second meditation, or the third, I don't remember the exact numbers. What am I thinking, okay? Descartes tackles with this question, and what is the status of the content of my thinking? Okay, there he finds out the impossibility of making a distinction between the possibility of dreaming and actually thinking about the actually existing objects or other human beings, okay? I may not have an existence, if you like. I, whatever this M is, okay, may not have a body, but simply dream itself having a body and having experiences of the bodily things by the medium of this body, okay? And it could be well possible that this would turn out to be actually a dream rather than reality, okay? So in that regard, he finds it difficult to come by with a proof for the truth of the content of thinking, okay? Now, this brings him to the question of what if all of the contents of my thinking are nothing else than a bunch of illusions. I may not be here in Turkey. I may not be a male. I may not be at the age of 55, okay? I may not be here in this classroom, but it was possible for Descartes' Cartesian thinking that I might have been dreaming all this while I was lying in a bed somewhere. Okay? So this difficulty, don't forget, even though it may appear to you quite easy to overcome this difficulty will stick to our understanding of the world and will follow us up to today. Okay? We had not yet overcome this difficulty. Okay? But his path was somehow different. Somehow different that he argued that even though it's possible that all the contents of my thinking is nothing else than an illusion, even though there may be an evil demon that forced my thinking to have those illusions which have nothing to do with the truth of the world, reality, okay? Even though that demon could be omnipotent, capable of doing everything, it cannot change the fact, the simple fact that I am thinking right now. This was a very powerful argument, okay? Regardless of the content of thinking, okay? Regardless of the omnipotence of a God, benevolent God, or an evil demon. Therefore, Descartes was capable of establishing on a very strong logical ground the existence of human thinking. Or if you like, what he called the existence of the I. Ergo cogito sum. You know? I think, therefore I am. Again, even though it was a quite satisfactory formulation at the time, don't forget, even though Descartes was capable of overcoming the evil influences of the demon, okay, he was not able to establish, found our claims of knowing particular things, the particular content of our thinking, if you like, on a solid ground. What he proves, what he turns out to be capable of proving, was nothing more or less than the existence of our thinking. Fine, all right. And that was a very important step, simply because that existence of our thinking owes its existence now no longer to a creative God nor an evil demon. Okay? Our thinking itself turns out to be capable of proving the existence of its own self. That was a very important step, actually, opening up the whole possibility of what we call modern thinking. Okay? Well, fine, all right, but the second difficulty remains there. Okay? What about the particular contents of our thinking? What about our claims of knowing this or that or those and these over there? Okay? What about our claim with regard to the truth of the formula 2 plus 2 makes 4? Okay? With regard to this, the serious danger of there being an illusion or a dream still continues, still with us. Okay? We are not capable of founding their truth on a solid, dependable ground. Okay. The second step Descartes takes, therefore, is the differentiation between thinking, which is capable of proving its own existence, you know, and its contents. Or if you like, the objects of thinking. Okay? Now, I'm almost come to repeat this same separation brought about the withdrawal in the ancient Greek sense. Okay? Thinking now separating itself from its content, withdrawing from its content, so to speak. Okay? Now, Descartes was capable of bringing forth the truth of the content of thinking only by assuming that, no, there can't be an evil demon over there, but there gotta be necessarily a benevolent, good God. Okay? That would enable me, give me the possibility of the truth of my contents of my thinking. Okay? So that only through the existence of that benevolent God, I am able to come to prove the truth of the content of my thinking. That, for instance, there is a desk here. It is not an evil demon that forces me to have the illusion of the white desk here, but rather a benevolent God who refrain from misleading me, from misguiding me, okay? Therefore, feeding me with the correct, true knowledge. Okay? You know, this separation between thinking itself and its content, which he dealt with, as far as I remember, in the third meditation, okay, divides the existence into two. You know, this is why his thinking is usually referred to Cartesian dualism. Okay, Actually, if you ask me, we should call his thinking as not dualism, but three-partyism or something. I'm going to try to explain. For matter, first, as the possible content of my thinking is assumed to exist as substance, I'm going to explain what substance here in that sense, whose characteristic is extension. You're going to be careful here. Okay, when I say matter, for instance, you seem to be understood the term. Come on, man, what's matter? What's it? We immediately attributed an actual real existence to the matter. No, stop short doing this, okay? Just don't do it. It is quite fragile existence, don't forget, in Cartesian thinking, is simply based upon the assumption of the existence of a benevolent God, on nothing else. If there was no benevolent God, the human thinking would never be able to show that there is matter over there whose characteristic is extension in space, okay? Simply because it is the very content of thinking, the primary content. And in contrast to this, on the other hand, on the other side, we have thinking or mind, okay, whose stuff is of the spirit, and only with the assumption of that benevolent God, good God, it turns out to be possible to bring them together on one and same plane of existence, okay? In other words, to be able to say, for me, to be able to say that, here is the matter, and here is the existence, my thinking, and they do exist in the same existence, so that they can somehow relate with each other, okay? To be able to say that, Descartes requires that good God, simply because the only possibility of their being related with each other, this was one of the difficult questions of the Cartesian thinking, how an idea come to affect matter, or how matter comes to affect an idea, okay? For instance, how come my nervousness, okay, affect the matter of my body, or the matter of that chair over there, okay? So, thinking as such cannot act on the matter, therefore cannot relate itself to the matter, and matter as such cannot act on thinking, therefore cannot relate with the other. So, as a thinking somebody here, standing on this side of the equation, okay, I repeat the same question. How come that I come to know that I have a body of the stuff of matter? Okay? The only guarantee of saying this, that I have a body, therefore in Cartesian thinking, requires the assumption of the existence of a good, benevolent, moral God. Okay? So therefore, that's why I say that Cartesian thinking should be thought of as a tripartite thinking. Without the assumption of the existence of a good God, there can't be no Cartesian universe. Okay? Now, why? Because Descartes understands these two components, mind, thinking, spirit, and the body, okay, or matter, as they are substances. Here in this terminology, substance means something whose existence cannot be dependent upon the existence of any other thing. Okay? Which means that these are, as substances, do themselves constitute encapsulated universes close to their externalities. Okay? So one cannot affect a change in the other. Okay? So that you cannot say that matter has turned out to be so and so because something this or that happened in the formation of the mind. Okay? If that would be the case, then they wouldn't be substances simply because the changes in the mind would create changes in the matter. Therefore, you wouldn't be able to say that matter is itself a substance. Okay? Simply because that time the last form of the matter would be dependent upon the form of the mind. Okay? So the only possibility of therefore knowing the truth of the contents of our thinking with regard to the objects of the external world, apart from the existence of the I here, okay, turns out to be requires the assumption of the existence of God. So, what teaches this to us with regard to our understanding of modern sciences and modern knowledge? Okay. First of all, it teaches us that contrary to commonsensical assumption or acceptance, modern thinking was not based upon the rejection of the idea of God. On the contrary, it was exactly based upon that assumption. Okay? Strange enough, we were trying to write the history of secularism since the time of Renaissance. But we forget that the term itself has been produced by clergy, not by the man of enlightenment. Actually, what man of enlightenment was trying to do is to protect the true faith against the superstitious interpretation of the scripture canons. Okay? So take a look at, for instance, what Voltaire has to say about faith. Okay? Rather than rejecting faith, rather than rejecting the existence of God, he was emphasizing the existence of God, but opposing against the church superstition that if you donate so much money to the church, you would buy yourself a place in heaven, for instance. Okay? And that was possible by only bringing forth the importance of reason into the foreground. Okay? But this, of course, puts a requirement on this benevolent God as well. Okay? When you bring forth the reason, it begins to imply that neither God nor nature any longer are allowed to act unreasonably. Okay? Okay, let's stop here for the time being.